Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into a real masterclass in legislative architecture. We're going to look at exactly how India built its legal shield against pollution. Think of this not just as a dry history of laws, but as the systematic construction of a massive defense mechanism for our environment built piece by piece over several decades. Let's get into it. Okay, let's lay out the roadmap for today's session. We'll start with a quick introduction. Then examine the Water Act of 1974. Follow that up with the Air Act of 1981. And then dive into the big one, the Umbrella Act, or the EPA of 1986. Finally, we'll wrap it all up with a quick summary.
Section 1. Introduction to Environmental Legislation. Targeted Legal Strikes.
So as you'll see, environmental protection in India didn't just happen all at once. It actually began with very targeted legal strikes, right? In 1974, the government zeroed in on water. Then, by 1981, as industrialization really started ramping up, the focus shifted to the air we breathe. And finally, in 1986, we see the culmination of all these efforts with the Environment Protection Act, to really clear logical evolution from specific problems to a much more comprehensive solution.
Section 2. The Water Act of 1974. Prevention and Control.
Now, what's fascinating here is that the Water Act gives us a very precise legal definition of pollution. It doesn't just vaguely point to dirty water. No, it specifically defines it as the contamination of water due to wastewater discharge, whether direct or indirect. But here's the absolute key takeaway. The threshold is harm. To be legally considered pollution, it has to be likely to cause injury to public health, to living things, or make the water unfit for domestic, industrial, or agricultural use. So it's a definition anchored completely in human and ecological consequence. It's designed to protect the very water you and I rely on every single day.
Of course, a law is only as good as its enforcement, right? To give this teeth, the Act created some foundational enforcement bodies, the Central and State Pollution Control Boards, the CPCB and SPCBs. It explicitly prohibited the disposal of poisonous or noxious matter, and it even strictly barred anyone from obstructing the proper flow of streams. And if you broke these rules, well, violators weren't just getting a slap on the wrist. They faced severe punishments, including massive fines and actual imprisonment.
But how do these pollution control boards actually enforce the rules on the ground? Well, they were granted some incredibly specific physical powers. First off, they mandate prior approval before an industry can even establish or expand any activity that discharges effluents, literally stopping the problem before it starts. Second, they have the legal power to physically enter and inspect industrial plants, factories, and comb through their records and registers. And third, they can take actual samples of industrial wastewater right there on the factory floor for lab analysis. This was a true game changer. It took environmental protection from abstract legal theory directly to on-the-ground reality.
Moving on to Section 3. The Air Act of 1981. Air Pollution Control.
Much like the Water Act, the Air Act carefully, and I mean very carefully, defines its target. It defines air pollution as the presence of any solid, liquid, or gaseous substances in the atmosphere. So it covers everything from particulate dust to invisible chemical vapors, literally the air we're breathing right now. And just like before, the legal threshold is harm. It applies to any concentration level that is injurious to humans, living creatures, plants, property, or the broader environment.
That regulatory blueprint from 1974 was so successful that lawmakers essentially said, okay, let's replicate this for the air. So if you look at both acts, they both rely on the exact same pollution control boards. They both require prior approval for discharges, whether we're talking about liquid effluents or gas emissions. Both grant powers to enter, inspect, and check records, and both rely heavily on rigorous scientific sampling, just shifting the focus from wastewater to ambient air and stock emissions. It's a highly consistent, very logical regulatory structure.
Now, initially, the Air Act was mostly focused on prevention and control, but this brilliantly illustrates how laws evolve, because a crucial amendment in 1987 is what really gave the law its teeth. It empowered the boards to issue administrative orders to flat-out close non-compliant polluting industries, and even more powerfully, they could now legally order the shutoff of electricity and water to those factories. Plus, they introduced a citizen suit provision, giving everyday folks a direct, legal mechanism to step up and fight pollution themselves. Talk about a powerful upgrade.
Which brings us to Section 4, the Umbrella Act, the EPA of 1986. To truly understand the origins of this massive piece of legislation, we actually have to zoom out and look globally. The Environment Protection Act of 1986 was enacted directly in the spirit of the Stockholm Conference, which was held way back in June of 1972. That international conference was really the philosophical catalyst that inspired India to build a comprehensive, unified legal architecture for the environment.
And legally speaking, this act is an absolute powerhouse. It was enacted under Article 253 of the Constitution of India. This is a landmark moment because, for the first time, it provided a single, unified focus in the country for environmental protection. People often call it the Umbrella Act because it was specifically designed to plug all those little loopholes left by the earlier, much narrower water and air laws. It gave the central government the sweeping power to take literally any measure it deemed necessary to protect the environment.
So, what are its core objectives? Well, they're incredibly broad and ambitious. It aims not just for the protection, but the actual improvement of the environment. Let that sink in. It's proactive. It focuses on preventing hazards to all living creatures and property. But for me, its most profound objective is the maintenance of a harmonious relationship between humans and their environment. It's just a beautifully stated, truly holistic approach to balancing ecology and industry.
In practice, the genius of this umbrella is that it allows the government to generate highly specific rules without having to go back and pass an entirely new act through Parliament every single time. And the sheer scope is staggering. Just look at the early years, from the Hazardous Waste Act in '89 and coastal regulation zones in '91, to the incredibly vital environmental impact assessments in '94, and specialized rules for municipal solid waste and noise pollution by the year 2000, all covered under that one massive umbrella.
And that umbrella's reach easily extended right into the modern era, tackling way more complex issues as they popped up. We get the Batteries Act in 2001, the Biological Diversity Act in 2002. It even paved the way for the National Green Tribunal Act in 2010. And by 2016, a huge wave of specialized management rules rolled out, covering everything from biomedical and plastic waste to e-waste, construction demolition, and wetlands. It really proves just how adaptable and wide-reaching this whole legislative framework truly is.
Section 5. Summary and Conclusion. Just to recap, India built this environmental shield starting with those highly targeted strikes back in '74 and '81, which eventually evolved into the massive, unified umbrella of the 1986 Environment Protection Act.
I want to leave you all with a final thought to ponder today. We've traced this really impressive history of laws and their robust enforcement mechanisms. But as industrialization accelerates at breakneck speeds and totally unprecedented pollutants emerge, we really have to ask ourselves, is this legislative umbrella strong enough and flexible enough to weather the environmental storms of our future? Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer. Keep analyzing, keep questioning, and I'll see you next time.